right, let's talk about Johnson & Johnson, because the company was facing a potential $17 billion judgment in Oklahoma over its possible liability for that state's opioid crisis. Yesterday, we finally got a ruling in that case. An Oklahoma judge ordered the company to pay $572 million. Now, Oklahoma was the first state to pursue a case against a major drug manufacturer for the nationwide opioid epidemic, and it could pave the way for potential additional lawsuits to come. Joining us to discuss is Harry Nelson. He is managing partner at the law firm Nelson Hardiman, and he is the author of The United States of Opioids, a prescription for liberating a nation in pain. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's great to be with you this morning.
So let me ask you, are you surprised by the judgment? $572 million, not nothing, but certainly a small slice compared to what the potential number was, that $17 billion number that was being thrown around. Do you still think this sends a message?
I still think this is it's a significant win for the state of Oklahoma. It's true, it's only a drop in the bucket of the $17 billion they were going after, but it's double what they settled for Purdue. It's 6 times what they got from Teva Pharmaceuticals. And it sends a message, more importantly, that the public nuisance theory, which doesn't require any proof of fraud, is actually is viable. And so I think this is broadly good news for the plaintiffs, bad news for pharmaceuticals, even though it's not nearly as bad as it could have been.
Hey, it's Angelique here. So I know that J&J has been seen as sort of being able to handle this, especially more than Teva, more than Purdue, because it's just a much larger company and more diversified in its product offering. What are your thoughts on that right now, just where we're looking to see how this all sets up? And I know they're appealing as well.
Yeah, so, I think Johnson & Johnson has a history of being more willing to press and not settle cases. They've had some other big cases out there like the baby powder case. So, and they have a brand and an image in the market. They have so many products that they're known for that I think Johnson & Johnson was willing to gamble that they wouldn't be viewed as a responsible party. But I think one of the lessons of this decision is that the harm is so profound from opioids, not just the overdose deaths, but the addiction that needs to be treated, all of the cost imposed on hospitals, law enforcement, first responders, still means that people are going to look to Johnson & Johnson as to the other opioid manufacturers to pay for the harm that was caused by these products.
Absolutely. And we know that they're waiting for the October trial, the multi-district litigation. What about looking at Johnson & Johnson overall? When you're talking about, how this is all playing out, when you're talking about just in general the opioid lawsuits, it looks like this is something that could potentially, right? Some people are saying it could potentially bankrupt some of the companies. And there's been a lot of comparison to the big tobacco settlements, which was something in the ballpark of $250 billion back then in 1998. And we're all the way up to about only $880 million in the settlement so far, plus J&J ruling.
Yeah, so I predicted a few months ago that this was going to be a multi-trillion-dollar settlement at the end of the day. The big difference from big tobacco to keep in mind is that big tobacco was just a settlement with the state attorney generals, and in this case we have 2,000 cities that have sued so far, and I believe many, many more lawsuits to come, not just from cities but from healthcare organizations and other people who are bearing the cost and the suffering of this crisis. So we have a long way to go with the 2,000 cases in Ohio, with the other state attorney general cases, and there's no barrier in the decades ahead to more and more lawsuits for the different kinds of harm that we're going to discover are going to come out of the opioid crisis.
Well, and Harry, do you think this fine was in the millions and not the billions because the court was looking at this and said, look, if we fine J&J too much, we'll damage an important American company? I mean, notwithstanding the horror of the opioid crisis.
I mean, I do think that Judge Balkman was very conscious that he was the first judge in the country deciding one of these cases, and he was looking to do something that would hold up. So I don't think it's an accident that this is roughly double what the settlement was. I think the judge was trying to be cautious, and it's a tricky thing. We have so many of these cases going on. How much is enough? The state of Oklahoma is thrilled to have $1 billion collectively now from Teva, Purdue, and Johnson & Johnson. But the question is going to be over and over again is how much is it going to cost to clean up this mess?
Harry, since you are predicting more cases to come and more lawsuits, I just wonder how this affects things in 2020 because the opioid crisis has been such a talking point on the campaign trail. And a lot of people wonder, who is really to blame and who bears the brunt of this? Whom should we look to try to fix the problem? Is it government or is it these companies? Are they the ones responsible? So I wonder if it starts to look like lawsuits against the companies will be successful, do you think that affects how these candidates start talking about the crisis?
Look, I don't think this crisis is going anywhere. The overall numbers of drug overdose deaths keep going up, up, and up. So this is going to be front and center for a long time. I do think we're going to start to see, I think the lawsuits are getting so much attention right now, but as some of these cases settle and the crisis continues, right, the overdose deaths continue and the addiction continues, I think we're going to hear more and more about community-based partnerships, about using schools, workplaces, faith communities, and looking for community engagement to address opioids away from healthcare. Because my view is this problem is here to stay for a long time and is connected to a lot of other deep social problems that are going to be a focal point of American life in the decades to come.
All right, Harry Nelson, thanks for coming on. He is managing partner at the law firm Nelson Hardiman.
Thanks so much for having me.